Hey folks, Steve here with a perhaps long overdue video on the Dark Valley. Um, First I want to apologize. It has been some time since I've done a video for this game, and some of that is just rooted in the fact that I've had no... I won't say I don't have free time, but that free time, if it's not being spent, working or commuting or doing things that need to be done, is being spent with my family, and so having the spare time to be in the game room and recording gameplay has just been very, very, very difficult. So in the short little bits of time I've had, I've done a couple other recordings on my computer, but I've not been able to say, like, okay, here we go, we're going to play a turn of the Dark Valley. And I know some folks are missing out on the fun here, and that they've been eagerly awaiting more on this. And I'm sorry, guys. It's just life, life's going good. It's just, very, very busy, and that's its own thing. I am playing World in Flames a couple times, or really once a month, and I'm having fun with that. And at some point, it would be fun to talk about what's going on in the World in Flames game that I'm participating in face to face. But being at home and being able to just play a game solo here out in the game room is just the tough thing, right? So I'm going to try to get through turn 8, and what I really... completing turn 8 would have been the better thing before a long hiatus, but that's just the way the cookie crumbled. Turn 8 is the last turn of the Barbarossa scenario, if you were just playing the Barbarossa scenario. And what's important about that is, at the end of turn 8, is also basically a check for... if the Axis has enough victory point cities to continue playing the game without a Soviet automatic victory. I think as we were playing through the last couple of turns, there were a lot of moments where it seemed like maybe we could actually hit some high marks and walk away with, not walk away, but continue on the game through the grand campaign. I think right now that probably won't happen. I'm going to have to go through... I think we're sitting at 27 victory points. And we need to get several more to keep playing. And Ted Racer, when he was able to provide some help with the game and guidance, said, keep the game going anyway, and just, keep a count for the victory points at that point. Technically speaking, if I look at the Soviet victory conditions, it would be wins immediately at the end of any victory check segment that one of the following applies. So the Axis player has 28 victory points or fewer in 1942. Technically, that would mean that the Axis could keep going if they were at 29 victory points at the end of turn... I guess it would be turn... No, yeah, I guess that is turn 8. Okay. So sorry, I'm like trying to get... It's been a while since I've even looked at the map. The game has been set up like this for weeks in my game room, and there's no dust because I'm not in here enough to be depositing a whole lot of dust, I guess, but that's the way it is. So we're at 27 victory points, I believe. We would need to have 29 at the end of turn 8 in order for the game to continue. Now, there were a couple instances where we were getting pretty close, that we were going to maybe have the ability to capture what we needed to capture. But last turn, when I played several weeks ago, I made some important mistakes that, unfortunately, I've had to correct. And the reality is, it doesn't help the Axis very much at all. So one of the things that I lost track of was the weather effects chart. And in the weather effects chart, you'll see here for the snow turns that German mechanized units have no ZOC. Period. And all German units not in or adjacent to friendly controlled town city, which is itself in supply, are out of supply for combat purposes. So this last part just makes it really tough to fight at all. And my big mistake that I had made was as it relates to Kharkov here. So just to kind of make sure I'm speaking, yeah, Kharkov, we had some units here that were in Kharkov. We had surrounded those units, and at the time that I was doing some checking, said, oh, well, this is out of supply. It's isolated. We have ZOCs in every hex. It's going to be isolated, and I had removed these units. Well, as someone kindly pointed out in the comments eventually on there, those units are actually not projecting a zone of control. And the rail line that goes to Belgorod and then on to the rest of the map is not currently blocked. And even if that rail line was blocked, without the ZOCs, they can count back to a rail line. So I had to put the units back, basically, and I just said, I think there was actually a division in there as well, and I just said, okay, well, I'll put the armies back, and that's just the way it is. But of course, the issue now is all these guys are basically going to be operating out of supply when we check logistics. And so what it really is like this winter is no joke. The winter has basically shut down everything. And in order to get 2 victory points by the end of the turn, we've got some problems. I'll put it that way. We'd have to. What I want to do is take myself off recording here because I've done kind of a long intro. I want to give myself a chance to think through it. But what I want to do, revalidate where the victory points are at, and try to figure out like where are the other 2 victory points that we're going to get to keep playing, right? And again, I could decide to keep playing anyway, but this is ultimately, I think, 8 turns of the campaign where I was playing for the first time, and I made probably some mistakes as the Axis early on that have just sort of had a extrapolated kind of effect on the game. Like if you don't do well at the beginning, it's going to be hard to make up for that down the road in the game. And so I want to look at that. Basically, what may end up happening here is, in the process of this episode, this video that you're watching now, a little bit later in the video, we'll come to a very important decision point, and I will need your input. I already am kind of leaning one particular way, and I'll describe that here a little bit later, but I believe I need to make a shakeup to this campaign series, knowing that the intention was to play all 44 turns or nearly that, but so many things flow into those opening turns of Barbarossa that that kind of makes it tough. And I've read different opinions online about how the game should go and what are some good scenarios to play. So let me do some analysis when we come back from the quick cut in the video. I'll have more information, and we'll talk through what we're going to do in this turn. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm using the good old red bingo chips again. I've used these before in the videos to capture our victory point totals based on the information that I have, and as I'm looking over the board and trying to figure out what's what, we are at 26 victory points. We start with 14 at the beginning of the game in Axis territory. We have 3 in the very north, 4 in the center, and then 5 more in the south. So adding 12 basically to 12 to 14, we get 26. So our goal, and the ones nearest that we would look to be taking, are basically all in the south. the ones that we are likely to take at this point in a single turn. Ted Racer provided some sort of thoughts on that when he reviewed my victory point situation. So Zaporozhye, Kharkov, and Odessa would be the main ones that we would try to take. Now, down here in Odessa, there are a number of Soviet divisions, and decently powerful. We'd be attacking with Romanians. It might be worth it to try. Go for broke, right? If we manage to get 3, that gets us to 29. But here's the problem. The other cities are going to be much harder to take. So we've got a city defense marker in Zaporozhye. While there is a lot of Axis units around it, it is still in supply due to our sort of response by the Soviets here. But we are right next to that hex, so it could be, we throw enough Germans into the blender, we might be able to take Zaporozhye, and then we've got Kharkov, the next closest one that we could deal with in one turn. And our problem with Kharkov, they've got 10 points defending. You toss in the terrain bonus for being a town, and the fact that in the winter we don't get our Zocs. 5, 10, 15. So we would be rolling. Find my combat charts here. 15 to 10 is basically 1-to-1 odds. And we'd have to roll pretty well. Wouldn't get any bonuses. We'd have -2 possibly from supply, and basically we couldn't displace those army units. Now that's my expectation as we look at the turn, right? So again, mech units have -2 to movement in this winter turn. The mechanized units have no Zoc. Air units are going to be done very quickly. And a lot of these units are out of supply for combat purposes. What I wonder about that is, do they mean that they're out of supply for combat purposes no matter what, even without the logistics chit? And if that's the case, and I believe that it is, it will be impossible to dislodge the Soviet units in Kharkov. Simply impossible, because we won't be able to roll anything but both sides losing a step, and there's 4 steps there. So there's just no way for us to do it. I'm trying to see if there's anything else that might matter, but I don't think so. So that's really our problem. It's really our problem. If we're being set to be out of supply for combat purposes, yeah, that's a bummer. That's a bummer. Yeah, there's just not, we don't have anything here to provide supply. So so they're going to have a -2 to the die roll, and the very best that we're going to be able to get isn't enough to take Kharkov. So just right away, I'm just putting this out there. I'll look at potentially playing through the turn, but they're just not going to be able to take Kharkov, and that means the Axis will have failed to reach the required victory points by the end of the turn. Now, that's a bummer, but we can see what we can get with the turn. We'll play it through, and then I will pose my ask to the viewing community here on how this goes. So, just going through the turn sequence of play, Axis reinforcements. This is going to be pretty straightforward. The only thing that they're going to get. Oh, great. All right. Bummer. The Axis actually has withdrawals this turn. They have to withdraw a Panzer HQ. One Panzer Army HQ, which is a bummer. Hmm. And I believe we do this. I think we do this during the reinforcement phase. I believe so. Let me just double check here. Yeah, I think we do that now. So, if the Axis is going to lose one of its Army HQs, which one do we get rid of, right? That is the tough thing. Because we also use them to push supply. And for what it's worth, they get one unit that will plug in over here, I guess. Where are our Army HQs? Well, we've got one down here, the first, down here in the south. We also have one, gosh, where did it go? I really need to put them on the top. Geez, stand by here, guys. So we have one down here, we've got one here, and then we have our one on the far north. So if we got to get rid of one, we wouldn't want to get rid of the one down on the south because we need to leverage it. So it might make sense to say, well, we get rid of one. We're not taking Moscow, right? We're just not taking Moscow, but we could keep putting pressure on Leningrad in the north, and otherwise we hold in the center. So I will say, we will take the 3rd Panzer Corps off the map. Panzer HQ, I'm sorry. That was up here in the center army group. There's the bummer. And we put the one reinforcing unit on the map. Axis aren't getting any replacements this turn. And now we have the Soviet side. Now, the Soviet reinforcements are, this turn, not huge. We basically get another shock unit, which is awesome for the Soviets, and we get another guard unit. The guard conversion has to take place. We're going to convert 3 replaceable infantry divisions, and they can be from the dead pile, which we'll go ahead and just do that. Easy peasy. And we'll place these units. So, just to put an even bigger punch in the face to the Soviets, we're going to pop this guard unit into Kharkov because we can. Let me make sure I can do reinforcements right next to a unit, enemy unit. Yeah, I don't see why not. Placed in any cities in the USSR with a line of communication, well, they do. And then with this shock army, shock army's pretty great. We'll put it in Voronezh with the idea that they can try to respond later. And then with the replacements, let's see. Okay, let's see. Well, it looks like the Soviets have some removals as well. We have to remove the Soviet Crimea, Leningrad, and Moscow militia corps. We're going to add 1 replacement point for each such supplied corps removed from the map. So, I have to find those guys. Oh, that actually makes Odessa weaker. Interesting. So we're going to pull the Crimean guys off the map. Moscow Corps, I'm sure, is right here. Yep. That makes Moscow weaker, but it doesn't really matter. And then, for sure, the Leningrad Corps is up there as well. And we get 3 replacement points for being able to remove each of those. We're also going to get a D6 for Lend-Lease. I'll roll that here. 1. So we get 4 extra replacement points. And then, let's see. We're also going to get 5 more for off-map factories this turn. So that's 9 replacement points. Let's see what else. And then I think we get our 20 for Leningrad, Moscow, Stalingrad, and Engels. So 29 replacement points. And we can do a whole lot of fun stuff with that, right? I could rebuild tons of armies as the Soviets. Kind of doesn't matter too much what we do. $29 is a lot. So we'll do 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and then 4 more would make us probably need to build some divisions, which don't care too much for, but there you go. So the Soviets are building up with their replacement points 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 armies in a bunch of divisions, which I'll place on the map. So we'll plunk one here, we'll plunk one here, we'll throw one in Tula, and plot 2 in Leningrad since we lost the militia corps up here. And then with these divisions that aren't terribly useful, but hey, the extra point is appreciated, we'll plunk those in a couple of these places as well, just to top them off. And that's it. So, replacement phase is over. I try to find my sequence of play again. You can tell I'm rusty, guys. So then we're going to have the air base phases and then strategic movement. I'm just going to stop recording. I'm going to handle those real quick off camera, and then we'll come back. Okay, so the air base segment, I didn't move any of the air bases. Didn't really seem like there were any good areas for that. Strategic moves were pretty minimal. The Soviets used some of their rail capacity, but not a whole lot to talk to. Just a couple of shifts over here. One thing I wanted to point out is I just realized that the city defense markers are now out of the game for the Soviets. Every city is now a full-blown city for defense purposes. So this is yet another nail in the coffin to progress for the Axis this turn. That means that Odessa, even with its reduced defenders, are now defending a proper city, which on the terrain chart is much more defendable here because it provides one combat shift, one column shift, rather than being treated as a town, which just gives a +1 bonus. So this now makes it very difficult, even more difficult than before, to attack these areas, and more bummer for the Axis here. The initiative determination. So the Soviets have initiative this turn, and we'll then look at what are the chits for the turn, and this is going to be pretty, I think, straightforward. So if I look, we're talking about December 41 through February of 42. The Axis get a move and a combat chit, so I'll get the camera down there like usual. So I'm going to fight with my camera. Come on now. There we go. Move and combat. Obviously we have logistics, and then there's the Stavka and move and combat. So, what to be done here? Well, if the Soviets get to go first, the real question is, do they want to move or do they want to do combat? Movement could maybe help do a couple of things. But it's kind of hard to say. Yeah, movement might be best. So I think what we'll have is the Soviets do their movement and set up some good activities, and then the rest of these will now go into the cup. Stavka, of course, doesn't go into the cup. That's used as an interruption chit, I believe. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take care of the movement for the Soviets here, and then we'll be right back. Okay, movement's complete. There wasn't a whole lot to do, but I'll point out what's probably the only real one that matters is that the assault army of the Soviets have moved up, and they're basically capturing this Axis set of units in Zoks, because the Soviets retain their Zoks at the moment here. And so if the logistics chit comes up, those units are going to be definitely out of supply for certain, even beyond for combat purposes. And if the Soviets want to, they could very likely attack and just crush those units because, again, the assault units, due to special rule, have doubled combat factors during this winter. So this is the Great Winter Counteroffensive, I guess, and we're going to squash some Axis. So we're going to go into the initiative chit cup, and we're going to pull. And what do we get here? We get logistics. Okay. Well, there you go. Well, these guys are isolated. And Hugh boy. Well, let's see. We got some isolated guys. The Soviets here in that city. And I think everywhere else is probably fine. I'm just looking around here. Yeah, I think we're okay on supply because everything is, yeah, I think everything else is alright for supply, but yeah, the thing about the Axis mechanized units not having Zoks really puts a change on things, but there's really only a couple of instances where the supply is really bad. So we've got some basic surrounded units there. We'll go ahead and pull the next chit. And we get Soviet combat. Okay, Soviet combat. I'm going to take us off recording. I'm going to think through where some combats maybe make sense. But again, at this point, it's almost like the Soviets don't need to do much but hold on and just begin to overwhelm the Axis. But if they can pick off certain units, that's going to behoove them. So we're going to take off camera, and I'll point out the combats when I'm done. Okay, so coming back from combat, I didn't launch combats everywhere I thought that I could, because I think it was getting to the point where the rolls were really good. I think I did enough damage to the Germans that it's moot point at this point. Down in the south, we forced some German retreats over here, and then we eliminated a Panzer unit right here. And what's really mattering for that is, again, the supply for combat purposes, basically providing bonuses to the Soviet die roll, and the fact that they can still bring a decent number of combat factors, and we've made good use of those assault armies across the board. We also eliminated those units over here, and basically Kharkov should be pretty safe at this point. And then along the line a bit here in Army Group Center, there are a couple of units that are actually eliminated on the Axis side. Many of those units were mechanized, motorized, or tank. So, yes, for certain, the Germans were getting their spearhead blunted and damaged, and hurting them greatly. And at this point, I think that's really where it's going to become a problem for the Axis to make any ground at this point. Going back to the cup, the only chits left are Axis chits. Going to pull the chits, and what do we get? Got Axis combat. So Axis combat, well, we could try for Odessa, and it's worth just trying that right away here now. So they have 3 combat factors. We would have 4, 6, 12. So 12 to 3 would be 4 to 1 odds, but then with the shift of the city, that would become 3 to 1 odds. So I think we'll roll it. So 3 to 1 odds, straight up. We rolled a 1. Well, there you go. Not good. Oh boy. I'm not sure where else we're going to attack. I'm going to take us off camera for the rest of the combats, because everything else, the Axis are going to lose the scenario, right? They didn't take Odessa. We rolled a 1. They're not going to take Kharkov. They could try to take Zaporozhye, but I think it's kind of moot point. I'll see if there are any other attacks that really make sense that can improve the overall situation, and we'll be right back. Okay, well, when it came to the combats, I really couldn't find anything that made sense. Due to the combat supply problem, I simply could not find a combat that really made sense, not without a great risk. And to be honest, I'm already seeing where Army Group Center is going to collapse in its northern half. There's a gap in the line, and when I just pulled the movement chit, and I can't even find a way to make movement work, due to the Zocs and everything else going on. So we've got, basically, I'm just coming down to it, the Axis just can't operate from this point. At least not in some critical areas, and just some of that due to some of my bad play. I did do some movement, so we've got, units that are coming across, pushing through, getting things in line for more to come, but the reality is we just can't make much more progress, though I think towards Leningrad, progress would occur in the spring. I think the Moscow situation would need to be rectified in some way. And in the south, I think we would continue to make some gains. But we're behind schedule by a lot, and a lot of our Panzer motorized mechanized units have been eliminated. Just to kind of show the dead pile here, we've got, you can see a number of Panzer units. It's just not a good situation from that angle. So, don't have much more that I think I can really do there that will make a difference. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to skip through the rest of the turn then, and we'll do Axis depot advance for the attrition phase. That depot in the far north isn't going to move anywhere. In fact, most areas, the depots just don't have anywhere to go, but it's worth rolling just to see if they can move up you know, they're going to get to move up, you know, 1 hex for all that it matters. Though, by and large, yeah, I don't think it really is going to change anything. Or actually, I would have to advance it here. Okay, so we would go 1, 2, 3. And yeah, everywhere else, I guess down in the south is what would matter here. We could advance it 3 hexes. 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay. So we move up our supply, and that's as good as that can get. German air supply segment. I don't think there's anything to be done there. And we have our attrition segment. Basically, the Axis will pick up Bryansk for free, and the Soviets lose a couple of divisions, but nothing too crazy, honestly. So that's it for that. And so we look at our victory check segment. Okay, well, we didn't capture anything new. We were at the end of turn 8. Technically, from here, if we were counting this as a normal game, the Soviets would win an automatic victory. We have failed to capture enough victory point hexes in our Operation Barbarossa attempt. And what would come afterwards is, you know, if we decided that we would continue playing, we would take the, I guess, 3 victory points that were lacking, and we would sort of apply that in future turns. Though I'm not exactly sure how we would look at doing that. But, you know, again, let me fix a couple of things here so we can see it all better. You know, we had captured, you remember, we started the game over here, right? And we've made a large gain, but we're petering out, and it's because of the weather, really. And, of course, you know, I've made mistakes as both sides all along the way. So as I sit here and I try to ponder, like, what happens next, right? What do we do with this video series? Because at this point, I feel like the game had just been marred by my poor early mistakes. And to progress at this point, I already feel like the Soviets have managed to grab a hold of themselves. They're going to lose some more stuff in the south for certain, because they just don't have the forces necessary to hold on there. But those replacement points are piling in. And, you know, there are replacements or reinforcements to come in big, gigantic stacks, as you can see there. And that's not even counting all the other stuff that are in the baggies to come in future turns. So, to me, I don't see the rest of this campaign panning out. Like, I feel like the game's already been decided. That's why the automatic victory checks are there to say, hey, listen, if you didn't make it this far and you're playing as well as you can, the Soviets are going to win. Don't drag out another 36 turns just to find out that the Axis is going to lose, right? That to me, that makes sense. But I also had tried to commit to playing through the whole campaign, not expecting that it would end so soon due to my poor play. So here is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a call out to the viewers, to the people who are used to watching these videos, who have watched in the past, who watched all of my Dark Sands playthrough, and that one we did get through the whole campaign, who have been watching this Dark Valley playthrough, and would like to see more Dark Valley. I have a question for you, and an offer for that, and let's see what we can do, right? So here are the options that I am laying out to you. Option 1 is you say, Steve, this was fun. You gave me a good taste of the game. Why don't you move on to something else? I've got a whole bunch of other games that I could be playing on the channel that I could also be setting up and playing through. I've got ideas for different games that would be fun to do some coverage on. The problem is, you know, with the game being set up here on my main gaming table, it is really hard to play anything else, right? So this has been on my main table here. I've got other tables, so I could maybe record other stuff and leave this up, but I lose a lot of space and it's hard to work with it, right? So I just say, hey, this was great, Dark Valley, call it here, move on to other stuff. And if I do that, if I do option 1, I will still do a review of the game. My intention has been I would like to do a review of the game after I've played it. I do think I've gained enough knowledge of playing the game that I have an opinion and I could do a review even if I've not played the whole thing. I know some guys do reviews and they've barely played a game at all, so it's like, what do you do there? But I think I could do a review on this. I could, spend the time, have the game, leave the game set up as is and talk through my review and do it that way, and then we move on to some other games, right? Option 2 is the double down on Dark Valley option. So what I would do there is I would clean up the map. I would take everything off the map because really this attempt is over. The Axis has lost. That's where we're at, unfortunately. And I had been staring at this map for a couple of weeks when I could, without playing and just trying to figure out what can be done. And at this point, there's just too much against the Axis to I think, make it compelling. So if we were to continue, here's what I would do. I would have a sort of a cheating video where I would basically look at, let's see, I want to make sure I say this right. So I would make a video for turns 9, 10, 11, 8, 9, 9, 10, 11. Dark Valley turns 9, 10, 11. That wouldn't actually be 9, 10, and 11, but would instead be a strategic video that wipes all of this clean and talks about the supply markers, the advancements along the rail lines, and what the axis of advance should look like with proper pre-planning and knowing about where the supply markers are going to be on a turn-to-turn basis. I've thought about this a lot as I had been playing this game, and I would like to talk through that maybe and show that. I could almost do that either way. If I'm going to package up the game as I'm packaging up, I could still do that and talk through that. And that would be a stand-in video for the missing turns from the Grand Campaign, turns 9, 10, and 11. And then what I would do is pick back up on turn 12 and set up the Fall Blau scenario from the playbook, from the scenario book. So we've got, we started the campaign game with Operation Barbarossa. We can start with Fall Blau, and that is starting on turn 12. Place the game marker on turn 12. So basically we would start, if we were looking at the turn track here, and I'm going to have a heck of a time with this, turn 12. Right there. Turn 12. Basically the spring-summer of 42 and play through Fall Blau from a new starting point in the campaign where things are maybe a little bit more on point to history. The setup's going to be funky for that, and I've got to work my way through what that looks like. We'd probably end up with something that looks maybe similar to this, but a lot better, I would hope. And we would play on then from there, and we would play through the Fall Blau scenario and see how that goes. Now, who knows what could be the result of that campaign. The Fall Blau scenario is meant to be 6 turns long. And, it has its own victory conditions. And along with the Grand Campaign victory conditions we could be tracking. And at that point, we could do a similar thing. And say, hey, Fall Blau didn't work out either. We're going to go ahead and cheat and skip ahead to Operation Citadel. We could do that too. It's just, we try to tackle this game so that I can record and show the game at the different stages, right? Because ultimately, you could play that Barbarossa scenario over and over and over again, just playing that initial Axis surge and Soviets playing defensive. And that's a fun game even by itself. Just playing those 8 turns, that's a fun time. And then you have Fall Blau and Citadel, where it's more of a equal side maybe kind of thing. And then in the later stages of the game, it's the reverse. The Soviets are pushing back against the Axis, and the Axis is trying to play defense and delay. And each stage of the game is going to be a little bit different. The Soviets have different replacement point values that they're getting. The Axis is in different shape of how their forces are doing and how well they're doing there. And it still may be worth showing all of that in the gameplay videos that I would be recording, and we just take it as a scenario by scenario basis. We try to play through the grand campaign. If things get really messed up and foobar, then we, hit the reset button and start the next scenario, right? I think that could actually work out okay, and would allow me to cover my mistakes and you guys still see a lot of the game. So there you go. Those are the choices that I'm going to present now to you. Leave your preference in the comments below. I will also count comments that are on the Board Game Geek posting of this video when it's up. So again, just to repeat and summarize for you, because I'm long-winded at this point, but it's been a while since we've talked to one another, guys. Option 1, pack up the game. And option 1 can include the strategic overview and strategy explanation of the supply markers traveling along rail lines, right? That can be included in option 1 if people want it. But option 1, pack it up. I move on. I start touching on some other games that I've got and that are interesting to me I'd like to tackle. Option 2, double down on Dark Valley, and we look to set up the Fall Blau scenario, but first we try to fit in that strategy video beforehand while I have all of this cleaned up, because to set up Fall Blau, I basically have to reorganize everything, get all the chits figured out, follow the setup instructions as the scenario book dictates, and it's a little bit involved because you got to remove some stuff, move some stuff, set up things a certain way. And to do so, I need to clean all this up. But again, that would be useful to talk through what I'd like to talk through for strategy. So there you go, option 1 or 2. If you can think of a weird extra option, maybe bring it up in the comments and we can hash it out. I would give one option my own vote, but honestly, I'm not sure the way I'm leaning at the moment, so I'll look to you guys to help get me some feedback, and then we'll take it from there. So thanks for watching, guys. Sorry this video is just a little bit of a drag as I'm trying to get through it. I think I've learned a lot about the game in these 8 turns that I've played, and I think that's going to inform what happens next in the next playthrough that we do if we go with option 2. So it's all good stuff, guys. I appreciate your views. I know we've got some new subscribers, and those new subscribers haven't seen any new videos lately, so I apologize for that, but we'll keep tackling what we can tackle. So keep on gaming, guys. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one.